I understand that Robert Saleh has got to try to recraft the narrative and get his guys on board with the fact that the guy who's been the centerpiece of the organization is not there and lasted all of 4 snaps and didn't even complete a pass. I get it, but I'm just not ready to just say, okay, they're done. But Saleh has to get them to convince that before the rest of us will believe it, if that makes any sense, and maybe it doesn't.
I mean, it does make sense. And we're being told here on the rundown that the Cowboys are 9-point favorites over the Jets, which to me makes complete sense because I understand why Saleh publicly has to say, well, I don't know why everybody's writing our obituary, but I got 2 words for you, Robert Saleh. And I say this with all due respect, Zach Wilson. I mean, what did we do the entire offseason but replace Zach Wilson with somebody who you believed could take this Super Bowl caliber roster and put it in the actual Super Bowl? Right? That's what Aaron Rodgers was supposed to do. And now you have Zach Wilson who, was just running backwards. And Mike, I don't know how much you saw the Manning cast. I don't quite watch it when it's on, but then I see clips and I watch some of the replay or whatever it is on my DVR. And Peyton Manning watching Zach Wilson play quarterback told me so much about what we need to know about Zach Wilson playing quarterback. So unless there is some sort of dramatic, and I mean dramatic improvement that comes from Zach Wilson being QB1 at practice all week and maybe working with a different guy, in the headset and Nathaniel Hackett, I don't really know what we're supposed to think other than, man, the Jets have a really good roster and they are really loaded other than at quarterback. And we all know that quarterback is the most important position on the entire football field.
Absolutely. And, maybe it's just because it was a busy week. I forgot all about the Manning cast. And the Manning cast is usually the thing that I'll watch on Tuesday morning as kind of more of a podcast because I still don't want to be distracted from watching the game. And having them on during the game distracts me from watching the game. But if you're not getting the Peyton Manning seal of approval, then that's a problem. If he sees issues with how Zach Wilson is or isn't playing quarterback, that's a problem. And Zach Wilson is the guy. Robert Saleh has already said that. He's the guy who will take the team as the starter. The question, though, becomes now that Rodgers is on injured reserve and he isn't coming back, a full tear of the Achilles, is out for the full season. Here's Saleh on the question of whether they will be looking for another quarterback to enhance the depth chart that currently consists of Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle.
We are going to look through some things, but I do want to make it very clear, Zach's our quarterback. We got a lot of faith in Zach. We're really excited about his opportunity. But we're rolling with Zach and excited for this, excited for him, and like I said, this opportunity that he's going to get. And I guess the message I'm just trying to deliver in terms of, we're going to look at everything. Preferably, not preferably, but you're going to look at veterans, you're going to look at young guys, but under no circumstances any of this a competition. This is Zach's team, and we're rolling with Zach.
It's funny, the little things they do to try to maintain leverage in negotiating with free agents. Well, preferably we're looking at a veteran. Not preferably. We'll go with a young guy, too. Because that's what they want to be able to say when the agent for the veteran tries to put a thumb on the scale because they know the Jets are in need. It reminds me a lot of the Vikings losing Teddy Bridgewater 7 years ago and having to give up a first-round pick and a fourth-round pick for Sam Bradford. Now, they weren't content to ride with Sean Hill, who won the season opening game against the Titans, I believe it was, that year. They bumped him to the side for Sam Bradford. They felt they had a Super Bowl-ready team. They needed to go out and get a guy that they thought would help them get to where they were trying to go. Here's the challenge. Do you want a backup to Zach Wilson, or do you want a number two who is doing all he can to supplant Zach Wilson? Do you want to be once again blinded by Mike White and have that guy that maybe comes in and the fans get behind him and then Zach Wilson is set aside? And that's relevant because I saw Rob Maudie of the AP saying, well, hey, if anybody out there is throwing out names like Jacoby Brissett as a potential trade for the Jets, which we'll get to, but that makes no sense because the Commanders need a backup too. That's the problem. Right. The teams that have backups aren't just going to give up their backups. You got to have two backups and be willing to part with one of them to have a trade. But Marty's point is, if you are talking about Brissett, how can you not talk about Carson Wentz? Well, here's why you don't talk about Carson Wentz. Because Wentz is going to walk through the door with the attitude that I should be playing. I want to be playing. So the question is, what do the Jets want? Do they want a guy who wants to be on the field and is going to maybe get pissy if he's not on the field? Or do they want a guy who's going to be part of this process to try to gradually draw out of Zach Wilson the quarterback they hope he'll become? And I doubt they've abandoned that, Myles, just because Rodgers got hurt. Like, the long-term play was, we keep Rodgers, and then we go to Zach Wilson. So now that that's been accelerated, you can't start throwing Zach Wilson to the bench and to the field and over here and over there, and now we're done with him and it's Chris Streveler again. You can't do that. You got to roll with Zach Wilson. So the backup needs to be a veteran who is all in and accepts his role and understands, as much as Peyton Manning isn't impressed by Zach Wilson, you're his understudy. You're not going to supplant him. This isn't a competition. We got enough crap to deal with. You have to be content and happy to be number two to Zach Wilson. I think that's the challenge, and that may be why Carson Wentz wouldn't be on the radar screen, because you're worried he's going to come in and he's going to be like, I was MVP candidate, and I'm this, and I'm this,
2017,
and you don't want that. Yeah, you don't want that if you're the Jets.
Of course not. No, you don't. And look, the thing that I guess I would also struggle with when you're talking about bringing in a quarterback that may or may not supplant Zach Wilson is who's going to know that offense, right? You have a guy in Nathaniel Hackett who has not really called plays very much in, let's say, the last, 5, 6, 7 years, right? I mean, he was the offensive coordinator for the Jaguars in 2017 when Blake Bortles took that team he was taken by the defense of that team to the AFC Championship game, right? And so, that's one guy. But then the other guy that's heard Nathaniel Hackett in his ear is Russell Wilson. And that's a non-starter when it comes to a trade. So it's not like there's anybody that who's really out there that really knows the offense. I mean, I guess Brett Rippon is another guy who is somebody that they could go out and get because he's on the Rams right now. But this is not a situation where you have a bunch of guys that are really familiar with the system, that understand who Nathaniel Hackett is as a play caller, that are at least a little bit familiar with the personnel and all that, and then could come in and kind of have at least a little bit of a seamless transition. I don't think that there is really anybody like that out there. So that's also why, it's like, well, what do you want? Zach Wilson, who has been in the offseason program, in training camp, who understands at least a little bit of what this offense is supposed to look like? Or do you want to bring in somebody who, I guess, kind of knows how to play quarterback in the NFL, somebody who another team would be willing to part with, or some veteran that's on the street, a la a Carson Wentz? There's no real good options here, right? It's like Tom Moore used to say, and is quoted, I think in a story over the summer saying this too. If Peyton Manning gets hurt, then we're bleeped, and we don't practice bleeped. Well, guess what? Aaron Rodgers just got hurt. So the Jets are kind of bleeped. You are bleeped. And there's no, and there's no other way to really talk about this other than to say that, because again, they replaced Zach Wilson because Zach Wilson was not good enough. Zach Wilson was replaced by Chris Streveler last year. So unless there has been some sort of extremely dramatic improvement, it's not going to go very well here.
And here's where Robert Saleh is really trying to will his way to a new narrative, because the reason we're putting the obituary on the 2023 Jets is they have lost one of the all-time great quarterbacks, the guy that was going to change everything, the guy that was going to make the Jets into Super Bowl contenders. We saw yesterday how the odds have shifted for the Jets because you remove one of the all-time greats and you put a guy who so far, based on 2 seasons, boom or bust, is bust as the second overall pick in the draft. You got Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. Great, bust, bust. If you had to apply a label now, this is Wilson's chance to turn it around. But that's why the 2023 Jets are And I think, and we've seen these hokey things in the past where a coach will bury a football. I think that was a Buddy Ryan shtick some years ago. But the 2023 Jets, the Hard Knocks Jets, are dead. There's no question. Because who was the centerpiece of Hard Knocks? It was Aaron Rodgers. Write the obituary for the 2023 Hard Knocks Jets, and let's go be the 2023 in-season Hard Knocks Jets. Let's make chicken salad on the fly. They knew all along there was a chance this guy was going to get injured at some point. He's had major injuries in the past, collarbone breaks, 2 years, almost completely wiped out. 2017 was the most recent one. 2014, I believe, was the other. So it's not unprecedented. And with these constant calf issues, it does not take someone with an advanced understanding of the human body to realize that the Achilles tendon is caught up in that whole area. And if you have chronic issues because you're really fast and you have great acceleration, so you put extra stress on that area of your body when you use your ability to accelerate at 39. This is what Sims said back when he suffered a calf injury during pre-offseason workout warm-ups with that goofy medicine ball and pulling a sled they were doing. Hey, this is an old man injury, and he's an old man relative to these younger guys that you see get crushed and twisted into knots and jump right up. So this was on the radar screen. You don't want to say, well, there's always a chance that Aaron Rodgers is going to tear his Achilles week 1 a la Vinny Testaverde. You don't want to say that because even if you're right about it, you're an asshole for even mentioning it before it happens. But this was on the radar screen. This wasn't some, oh my God, who would have ever imagined that Aaron Rodgers at 39, with a history of chronic calf injuries, would tear an Achilles tendon while he's running around trying to get away from Bills defenders because their offensive line is a who the hell knows what they're going to be. This wasn't some rogue development, Myles. This was clearly within the range of risks that the Jets were taking. But they gave it's like they gave no thought to it. They got so swept up in everything, they gave no thought to the possibility that we may not have Aaron Rodgers. Because really, if they did, they'd have a plan. They'd have a flow chart. There wouldn't be a couple of days of what the hell are we going to do? They would have been able to hit a button and say, all right, you know what? That thing we were worried about, it happened. What are we going to do? Zach Wilson backed up by who? Let's go get him.
Well, I mean, I guess, but at the same time, Zach Wilson seems to be the backup plan. And when Zach Wilson's your backup plan, that's not really a good thing.
But what's the backup plan to the backup plan? What's the backup?
Right, yes.
But who's next? Who's next? You got to, I just look at it this way. And
it's the third quarterback.
One of the things I learned last week when I removed my suit from the hanger before the Thursday night game in Kansas City and the pants were a size 41 waist, of all the things you worry about, and I worry about everything, it's the thing you don't worry about that bites you in the ass. And I just don't think the Jets spent enough time worrying about the possibility that this could happen because I feel like, and I know it's only a day in, but I feel like they really don't know what to do now behind Zach Wilson. And part of it is, hey, there aren't enough good quarterbacks to go around. There aren't enough bad quarterbacks to go around. That's the bottom line. And this whole back to the whole trade thing, who's going to give up their backup? Nobody. Who's got extra backups? The Saints do. Do the Saints want to give up Jameis Winston and go with Taysom Hill as their only backup until Jake Hefner is back from a PED suspension? I don't know. Maybe this is a trade that doesn't happen until Hefner's back. Maybe the Jets wait. I don't know. But the philosophical question they have to answer is, what are we looking for in a backup? Do we want a traditional understudy who is there to support and nurture and mentor the young player? Or do we want somebody who's going to come in and be, competitive and maybe knock him off the sideline? Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.